All right, excellent. Hey everybody, my name's Nathan Smith. I am the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you so much for joining me today for Microsoft Word Part 1, The Basics. I'm excited to dive into Word with you, and I'm glad you're here. So a few quick things to get out of the way. First of all, of course, I always want to encourage folks to check out the virtual events that are coming up on cals.org. We've got a ton of different stuff that's in the works. Author Kevin Brockmeyer, who previously visited us during the Six Bridges Book Festival, is coming back next Thursday, a week from today. It's 6:30 to discuss his new book, The Ghost Variations, and I'll be running the back end on that. We've got a ton of other technology classes coming up, including, of course, Microsoft Word Part 2, Styles, Mailings, and More, which is going to happen also a week from today at the same time as this class, 1 o'clock to 2:30. So join me for that for sure. If you're here, it builds right on the material that we've talked about today. And for folks who already have a little familiarity with Microsoft Word, this will expand their knowledge as well and help them do some cool, more advanced type things that that are really useful to know about. And there's a ton of other stuff. There's basic computing coming up, Rockstar Tech Tips, a class about OBS Studio, the streaming video program. That's going to be really cool. That's a new one as of this month. So yeah, come on, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for some more stuff and get a whole lot out of it. Speaking of which, the point of technology classes, I'm fond of saying, is for folks to learn things about technology. So I want to encourage you to ask questions that you have whenever they pop up. So that way you can make sure that you are following along with what's going on. If there's a question that's sort of lingering in the back of your mind, a lot of times that's kind of distracting. And certainly if I've said something that didn't quite land with you, you were confused about some terminology that I used, or you didn't quite catch what I did on the screen, in all those situations, you're missing part of the class. So I want to make sure that you are able to follow along and really get the most out of the class. So in order to do that, I want to encourage you, please speak up whenever you have questions. The best way to do that here in Zoom is to use the chat. So if you're on a computer, you can look down at the bottom of your screen. You should see a little chat bubble down there, a little speech bubble. You can click on that and it should slide the chat, the little chat sidebar out on the side. And you can just send me a question there, type it in and press enter, and it should go straight to me, and I'll be able to tackle that question. Please don't worry about whether it's a dumb question. I'm not going to judge you on that. I'm just going to tackle the question, because we all have different skills. We all know different things. And so, I just want to make sure the question gets addressed. I'm more than happy to tackle it, whatever it is. Also, don't worry about whether you're interrupting me or not. It's not an interruption. It's part of the class. So let me know if those questions crop up. If you're on a mobile device on Zoom, what you'll need to do is tap the screen and look up near the top for a little ... button that says More. Tap on that and then tap Chat in the little menu that appears there, and that'll get you into the chat on mobile. And finally, if you are joining me from another platform, such as Facebook or YouTube, use the Facebook comments or the YouTube chat to ask your questions there, and I'll see those. There might be just a smidge of delay, but if so, like if I don't see it right then, I will see it within a second or two, and we'll be able to tackle it. So, and of course, if you want to join us in Zoom, if you're watching on one of those other platforms and you want to hop over to Zoom, there's a link there in the video description or the text of the post on Facebook, and you can follow that link. And you'll have to enter your address or your name and your email address, but once you do that, you'll be in, basically. So come on, the Zoom waters are warm. Okay, so that's questions. The other thing that I always want to make sure that folks hear at the beginning of class is if there are technical difficulties, please, 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 I cannot emphasize enough, let me know about that as soon as you notice them. If my screen freezes up when I'm screen sharing, if my audio goes out, if my video goes out, please let me know about that as soon as you notice there's a problem, because that way we can fix the problem as soon as possible. On one infamous occasion, I talked for several minutes and covered a few points on my outline before someone finally said, your microphone isn't working. And so we lost that time during the class, and that was unfortunate. So don't want that to happen to you. I want you to get the maximum out of the class time today. So as soon as you notice technical difficulties, please let me know. I don't expect there to be a problem, but if there is, rather tackle it now than wait until later. Okay, that's all the starter stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in to the class itself. I'm going to fire up the screen share. All right, there we go. Cool. So here we are inside of Microsoft Word. Now, I will say, actually, let me go ahead and close that out and get back to kind of where we would start. Okay, so if you open up Word, normally you'll see something like this at first, if you just open it up without opening a document along with it. So you'll see over here on the left, we've got a few different options. We'll talk about what some of these do later on. Up at the top here, now I am using the newest version of Word, the Office 365 version of Word. So if you have a different version of Word, 2019, 2016, 2013, 2010, even 2007 or so, that's okay. It's going to look a little different, but pretty much everything that I'm going to show you applies to pretty much all those versions of Word. So if you're like, oh, my version of Word's way older than that, that's okay. No big deal. You know, it'll be perfectly fine. Excuse me. I had kind of a spicy lunch. So what I want to do is, if you're opening a version of Word that's similar to what I have here in front of me, you'll see something like this. And even older versions, a lot older versions, will look fairly similar. You'll have options over here. You'll have what are called templates right here. So these are going to be different sort of skeletons of documents in a way that are designed to sort of give you the option to not have to start from scratch if you are concerned, or if you're trying to write a particular type of document. So this one, for instance, is blue-gray resume. If you were to open this up, I'm not going to do it right now because we've got other stuff to get to, but if you were to open this up, you'd basically have this resume with a bunch of placeholder text and a placeholder picture, and you would be able to swap that stuff out for your actual information. Whether it's advisable to put a picture on your resume, I kind of don't think so, but that's definitely far afield from what our class is about today. Underneath that, you've got recent documents. So all of these documents are documents that I have opened on my computer within the last few months, looks like. So you can So, you know, having these here is pretty handy because if you want to jump back into a document that you were working with before, you don't have to remember where it was or anything. You can just be like, oh yeah, I was working on that yesterday. You open up Word, there it is in the list. You just click on it and open it right back up and you're back to work on it. So that's handy. So you'll see that there. But let's go ahead. We're not going to use a template right now, and we're not going to open a recently opened document because y'all don't have any of these documents on your computer. Instead, what I'm going to do is come over here to the left and click on blank document and open that up. And that's going to give us a blank page to work with, so we can get started writing our document. So, got the blank document open. Great. Let's talk about the layout here in Word a little bit. So that way we know exactly what we're looking at and where we can find things when we need them. Of course, we're going to talk a lot more about where exactly to find things and what the tools are and so on and so forth. But this will get us a long way towards that goal. So, up at the very top, we have the name of our document. Right now, it's just giving me a placeholder name, document 7. And then it says Word here in case you forgot what program you're using. Next to that, I have, and if you have much older versions of Word at all, even 2019 or so, I think, you probably won't have this little search box here. But you can search the help inside of Word using this. It's pretty handy. And I believe you can like find documents in your Microsoft Office and so forth using this search blank as well. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't use this a great deal. Over here on the left-hand side in the corner, we've got this area known as the Quick Access toolbar. The Quick Access toolbar is so named because it gives you quick access to certain tools, shockingly. So, first thing you want to note here in the Quick Access toolbar, and this is applicable to, I want to say, Word 2016 and onward, is this autosave switch right here. Right now it's set to off for me. If you save your document in Microsoft OneDrive or on a Microsoft SharePoint server, if you use SharePoint for work, things like that, then this might turn itself on automatically. And well, you'd have the option to turn it on or off if it doesn't turn on automatically in those situations. And what that's going to do is save my work as I go along and also keep track of different versions of my document so that if I make changes and I want to go back to a previous version of the document, I can do that, and I'm not stuck with a bunch of changes that I made that I later realized were mistakes, basically. So I've got that up here. But again, it only works if your files are stored online in some Microsoft, in a Microsoft online storage situation. Even if it's stored online in Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that, you're not going to get this. You're only going to get this autosave if it's in OneDrive or SharePoint. And so if it's just saved to your computer, you're definitely not going to get that. Next to that, we have the save button. If this autosave is off, you want to make very sure that you're taking advantage of this save button up here. So if you're working on a document that that's already been saved on your computer, then clicking on this save button will just update the existing file, the existing document on your computer with whatever changes you've made since the last time you hit save. So super easy. You probably, you may see a little progress bar down at the very bottom right here, but you probably won't really see much indication at all that anything's happening. But thankfully, I mean, you can basically just click this and then move on and keep doing what you are doing. It's a good idea to, well, as they say, save early and save off. Sure that you that you start saving your work early on in the process, and make sure that you keep hitting save periodically, so that way you don't lose your work if, say, the power goes out, or you've got a Word crashes unexpectedly, or your laptop runs out of battery, or you accidentally just close the window. Goodness knows we've all done that from time to time. So saving your work often helps you avoid that sort of thing happening. If you click this save button and you're working on a brand new document that hasn't been saved before, then what you'll want to do, or then what it's going to do, is trigger the save as function in Word. Save as is basically, it's going to ask you to name your file. So you're going to have to come up with the file name for it, and usually you just want to describe what it is. So if it's a letter to Jojo, letter to Jojo is a very good name for it. If you are, and then you're going to also need to figure out where on your computer you want the document to live. So most of the time, most folks will save their Word documents in the Documents folder on their computer, because that's a logical place to look for it later on. But you don't have to do that by any means. You can, you can put it in on the desktop of your computer. You can put it in the Downloads folder. You can have your own your own sort of hierarchy of different folders that it might be in, that will that you can sort of browse through and find what you need, and organize in a way that makes sense to you. Doesn't really matter where you put it, long as you can find it later. But once you've picked a name and a place for the file to live, then you're pretty much all set. And from there on out, you can just click that save button whenever you want to update the existing file, and you can know exactly where to get to it when you come back. So next to that, we have two additional pretty handy buttons. One up here is the undo button. It's grayed out or kind of transparent right now, but it's an arrow that's kind of curving off to the left here. The undo button exists because we're all human and we all make mistakes. And so when you inevitably make a mistake, you can use the undo button to undo your last action, whatever that was. For example, if you typed a sentence, you can go up and click undo to erase it. If you changed the color of some text, you can go up to the top and click undo to change it back to the color it was before. If you accidentally deleted a paragraph that you intended to keep, you can go up to undo, click on it, and bring that paragraph back, so you don't have to retype it. Thank goodness. So that's what the undo button does. When you make a mistake, you can just reverse that last action, and you can actually do multiple steps worth of undo. So if you click the undo button once, it'll reverse whatever the last action was that you took. If you hit the undo button again, it will reverse the action before that. If you hit it again, it'll get rid of the action before that, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a time travel in a way. You can go back to how your document was before you made whatever mistake or set of mistakes it was. Because of course, we have all made several mistakes in a row sometimes. So when that happens, you might get a little overexcited, or you might just have forgotten how many actions it was you took, or not been keeping track. And so in that case, you might end up hitting the undo button multiple times, but perhaps you hit it too many times. Sometimes that happens as well. So if that's the case, what you're going to want to do is you will want to use the redo button. So the redo button actually is not here right now, but it would be here in some situations. The redo button looks like a mirror image of the undo button. It's an arrow that's kind of curving off to the right. And the redo button undoes your undoing. So let's say that I made 3 mistakes, but I accidentally hit the undo button 5 times. Well, I have the redo button. I can click that twice, and then I'm good to go. So it's going to undo my last 2 undoings and get me back to where I need to be. The only trick about this is if you're using the undo button, or if you want to use the redo button, you have to use it as the next thing after you hit undo. You can't close the document in between, and you can't do any other work in between. If you do some other work in between, you'll get this, the repeat button. The repeat button will just repeat whatever the last action was that you took, rather than undoing it like the undo button does. So if you change some text to red, then you could come down in another place in the document, select that text, and hit the repeat button and change it to the same color red, which is really handy sometimes. But in its place, the redo button will show up if you've just hit undo, or if undo is the last thing that you did. It's kind of like a time travel movie, though. Again, back to time travel, you know, if you're in a time travel movie and you go back in time and you change the past, and then you return to the time that you came from in the first place, things are going to be a little different because, like, oh, you went back and stopped World War II. Well, all these things that happened in World War II never happened. So what does the world look like now? Kind of the same deal, although on a much smaller scale, with undo and redo. If I undo some changes and then I make some more changes, and then I realize, oh, I undid some work I intended to keep, and I try to go to redo, it's not going to work. It's just gonna, I'm just not gonna be able to do that anymore. Because I essentially went back and changed the past, and so the future is going to be different. So just make sure, particularly if you hit the undo button multiple times, that you check over your work and make sure you didn't undo work that you intended to keep. If you did, hit the repeat button. Otherwise, move on with your life and you're good. So one last thing about the quick access toolbar here, it has this drop-down arrow next to it. If I click on that, it's going to give me a drop-down menu. In computer world, whenever we say a menu, we're just talking about a list of options that you can choose from. Just like at a restaurant, a menu is the list of things that they can make for you, and you have to select one. The drop-down menu here will allow you to click on additional tools that you can add to the quick access toolbar, or commands, as Microsoft calls them. So if I wanted, say, the open button there, I could click that and it'll show up. I'm going to uncheck that though and put it back the way it was. And if you find yourself hunting for a particular command a lot as you get into using Word more, you can come down here, click on more commands, and then pretty much any action that you can take in all of Word can be added to this quick access toolbar. So rather than having to hunt it down, now you got it, and it's right there for you. So lovely. All right, down here underneath the quick access toolbar and the name of the document is this area called the ribbon. The ribbon in Microsoft programs in general is a design concept. I mean, it's a design concept that Microsoft likes a lot, and they use it in most of their software nowadays. Basically, what it does is it allows you to kind of keep the commands that you have available to you organized and be able to find them more easily. So you've got the you've got kind of the basic tools that you use regularly up here at the top in what's called the Home tab. And then the way I like to think of it is it's kind of like a big tool chest. If you've ever seen those big tool chests in, say, a mechanic's shop or a wood shop, occasionally you'll see a tool chest. It's got a ton of like different drawers and different sets of tools or different types of tools can go in there. So If they're pretty well organized, the person who runs the shop might have a drawer for screwdrivers and a drawer for ratchets and a drawer for hammers and so on and so forth, so that as they're working, if they think, oh, I need a ratchet, they can go over to the cabinet, pull out the ratchet drawer, grab the one they need, and then get right back to work. That way they don't have to dig through a big old pile of tools. So the ribbon kind of works the same way in Microsoft software. The Home tab is the tools that you use most frequently. The Insert tab, if I click on it, you'll notice it changes all of the tools that were down here underneath, underneath my tab names there. So when I click Insert, this all changes, and I get tools or commands that allow me to, as you might imagine, insert things into my document, such as a picture, a table, a link to a website, a text box, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can drop stuff into my document from the Insert tab here. The Design tab, if I click on that, that's going to give me some options related to essentially the visual style and sort of layout of my document. So that is something that we'll dig into in part 2 next week. I definitely encourage you to join me for that. It's pretty cool stuff, and it can help make your document look a lot neater and more polished. The Layout tab gives you things like the size and shape of your page and how big your margins are, things like that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The References tab allows you to cite your sources, and if you're writing something nonfiction, you better cite your sources, because otherwise you could be accused of plagiarism, and that's no good. So that's where the References tab comes in handy. The Mailings tab is another thing that we'll talk about in part 2. And basically the Mailings tab gives you the ability to, create one version of a document and have it work basically use it for and have a personalized version for a bunch of different recipients. So if I'm writing a letter to all of my customers for my business, then I could make one version of it, and it would fill in their name. Dear Kevin, dear Janie, whatever, and that makes it a little look a little slicker, a little more personalized, and gives you a lot of ways to sort of make it exactly what you would want it to be without doing a lot of extra work. So it's pretty handy. That's also covered in part 2 next week. The Review tab here is for essentially working with other folks and collaborating with them. That's another thing that we'll talk about in part 2, the ability to use that to help to use some of these tools so you can edit documents for people and do all sorts of really useful things, and collaborate, provide feedback, and so on and so forth. The View tab changes how you see your document without actually changing the contents of it. So you can look at your document in different views. This is not something I use very often personally. Zoom is here, so you can zoom in and out of your page pretty easily. And you can change what specific features show up on screen. For example, the ruler here, if I uncheck this box, will go away. And if I check it, it'll come on back. There's also the Developer tab, the Help tab, and the Acrobat tab. The Developer tab here is something that you probably won't see unless you've changed the settings in Word, but it gives you some advanced options that you can exercise if you like. The Help tab up here is exactly what it sounds like. You can contact their support. You can look through the help documentation and so on. You can give them feedback if you notice a problem. And then I also have an Acrobat tab because Adobe Acrobat's installed on my computer. Unless you have the paid version of Adobe Acrobat, you won't see that tab and you don't have to worry about it. We're certainly not going to talk about it again in class. And finally, when I click the File tab over here, you'll notice it does something pretty different. Instead of changing my options at the top of the screen, it takes me back to this familiar looking area right here. This is known as the backstage. In the backstage, we have some very important kind of basic functionality. So there's new, which will create a new blank document for us. There's open, which will open an existing document on our computer, for instance, one that might not be in this list. There's info, which tells you kind of basic information about the document that you have open. For example, how much space it's taking up on your computer, who the original author was, when it was last updated, things like that. Save and save as, we've already talked about. You can access them here in addition to using the little disk in the quick access toolbar. Save as Adobe PDF. Again, I have that because of Adobe Acrobat, but you probably won't. Print, obviously, will give us the ability to print our document when we're ready to. Share, you can basically send your document to people various places online. Export here. One thing I will point out about this, when you use this export option, again, you won't have create Adobe PDF, but you will have create PDF/XPS document. This is an important option to know about. If you're writing a document and you want to make sure that it looks exactly the way that it should, exactly the way you intend it to look, when it gets to the person who's going to be receiving it from you, when that happens, you don't want to send them the Word file. The reason for that is, depending on what version of Word they have, what kind of computer they have, whether they're opening it on their computer or on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, whether they have a Mac or a PC, a whole bunch of different things. Depending on any of those, depending on any of those factors, whether they have the right fonts installed on their computer, your document may not look like your document may not look the way you made it when the person on the other end receives the document. So instead of sending them the Word file, what you want to do, particularly if it's something really important like a resume or something like that, what you want to do is, once you've got it exactly the way you want it, you want to come in here to the backstage, click on export, click create PDF/XPS document, and click create PDF/XPS. And then create a PDF version. PDF stands for portable document format. You will never hear anyone say that phrase to you ever again in your life, so don't worry about it. You can forget it right away. But the reason it says that is it contains all of that stuff, the fonts and the exact layout of your text and images and all that stuff. All of that is inside the document in a PDF file, whereas it's not necessarily inside the document in your when you're working inside of Word. Also, it can't be easily changed. So you have to have paid software, and even, well, most of the time, and even then, it's not very, it's not super duper easy to change a PDF even then. So it'll be exactly the way you set it up. Even if somebody accidentally slips on their keyboard or something like that, your document will still look the same. And then it says free viewers are available on the web. Basically, you can open a PDF file on almost any device with a screen, save maybe your smart TV or something. If it's a mobile device, a tablet, a smartphone, if it's an e-reader like a Kindle or Nook or something, or if it's a computer, it can read a PDF file. And so that's really handy, because it means your file will open on whatever device they're trying to access it on, and it'll look the same. So just to point that out, you could also save it as other file types, so we're not going to go there. Transform down here, there's a whole thing to make it into a web page. That's new. You probably won't have that. It's fine. And then don't click on it, but close is down here. That will close your document without closing all of Word. And then down here at the bottom, account, that deals with your Microsoft account, whether you're signed into one, what your account information is, and so forth. Feedback, so you can give them, you can tell them if like there's some bug in the program. And then options, so you can change the default settings in Word. I don't find myself having to do that almost ever, so you probably won't need to fiddle with it. But if you're like, I wonder if you can change it to work like this, you might as well look in the options and see if there's something there. I'll click this left arrow to go back, and that's going to take us back to the document where we were before. I'm also going to click the Home tab up here to get back to those tools that we use most frequently that we're going to talk about now. Okay, so let's dive into this. What we want to do is I'm just going to write a little bit of nonsense, and then we're going to talk about sort of the writing part of Word in general, because obviously that's pretty important. All right, cool. We got some text here. I wrote some nonsense for us. You don't have to write the same nonsense. You can just type something if you're following along in Word. And if you're not following along, then you don't have to type anything. So let's talk a little bit about the whole, about the way that some of this stuff works. So I started typing, and when I got to the end of the line, my cursor, this little blinking line here, it's just above my mouse pointer, my cursor automatically moved down to the left-hand side, the beginning of that next line. So I started up here, it looped automatically down here once I filled up this whole first line. That's something important to think about. Back in the day, a lot of folks, and even now, sometimes you might see folks press enter to try and get to the next line. You don't have to worry about that. You can just keep typing when you get to the end of a line, and it'll just automatically roll down to the next one. The only time you need to, that you do need to do something to move down to the next line is if you get to the end of a paragraph. If you get to the end of a paragraph, you'll want to press enter on a PC, a Windows computer, or if you're on a Mac, it's return. So you'll press enter, and then that takes you down to the next line without filling out the current one. And I can write a new paragraph. Cool. So whenever you want to start a new paragraph, press enter. Otherwise, just keep typing, and you'll be good to go. A few other little tips. You don't have to worry about. Some folks were probably taught when they were growing up. You want to indent the beginning of each paragraph. You don't have to do that in Word or in really any digital text at this point. don't indent the first line of the paragraph. It's not necessary because Word automatically adds space at the end of each paragraph to separate paragraphs from each other. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on, but I do want to point that out. Also, a lot of people learned back in the day, after a period before the next sentence starts, you should double space. Don't do that. That's not the accepted thing anymore. You only need to put one space between your punctuation and the beginning of the next sentence. So just a few little tips to make your life easier, honestly. So that's the basics as far as typing. Oh, right. If you want to move your cursor around this little blinking line, you can do it with your mouse. Take your mouse and click somewhere, and the cursor will go there if it's inside the text. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So the up arrow will bring my cursor up one line. The down arrow will take it down one line, and then left and right will go over one character each time. If you want to get real fancy, you can use the home key above those arrows to go to the beginning of a line, or the end key above those arrows to go to the end of a line. But I mean, it was years and years before I started using that, even though I knew it existed. So if you're like, oh, that's too much, just focus on the arrow keys, get used to that, and then you can incorporate home and end later on. It's cool. Okay, so that's that. Now let's try some formatting. When I say formatting, that is a word that we use in our that's a word that we use in technology world that basically means kind of making something look different without changing it altogether. So, particularly with text, like we have in our document. For example, I'm going to select this paragraph that says this is a new paragraph. It's short. What I'm going to do is move my mouse up here next to the last bit of the paragraph. I'll hold down on my mouse button, and while I'm holding down, I'll move my mouse over to the left here, and that is going to select the text. You'll notice it's kind of shaded in gray like that. Now that it's shaded in, I can make some changes to it. So I'm going to come up here to the top, and I'll find I'll find this section of the Home tab called Font, and it's got a few little drop-down boxes and a bunch of other little buttons that we'll talk about here shortly. If you don't see this tool, again, just remember at the top you'll need to click the Home tab before you'll see this. If you're on Insert or Design or whatever, that's not going to work. You're not going to see these same tools. In the metaphor that I used previously, not seeing this would mean you've got the wrong drawer open, and so you're not able to see the right tools. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about this. In this little box, it says Calibri body in parentheses. When I click on the drop-down arrow, you'll notice it changes to just Calibri. And when I go down here, it says Calibri and then body in parentheses. We'll talk about why that is next week in part 2. But for now, if it's something in parentheses like that, headings or body, you can safely ignore that for the moment. If I go down here a little further, though, I'll see a bunch of fonts. Now, fonts are just different sets of designs that can be used for the text inside of your document. So, for example, so the default that we started out with, the one that it uses when you first open Word, is Calibri. That's the name of that font. But if I scroll down here, let's say I want something like Bodoni MT Black. Here we go. I'll click on that. And now, once I've selected that, all of my text changes to look like that. you'll notice I have these little like these little sort of, I don't know, flat parts on the ends of my my letters here. Those are called serifs. They're little additional stylistic things. When you're reading text on paper, such as in a book, these serifs make it easier to read. When you're reading text on a screen, though, sans serif fonts like this, are actually easier to read. It's a little weird, but it's true. These sans serif fonts, the ones that don't have these little flourishes, are easier to read on paper. And then fonts with serifs like this are easier to read, or excuse me, these are easier to read on a screen. Fonts with serifs or serifed fonts are easier to read on paper. So think about where your document's going, and that, if you're trying to decide on a font, that can give you a clue about what font you want to use. So, I can scroll on down here. There are a bunch of fonts installed on my computer, and I can select whatever one appeals to me. It'll change, it'll change the text to look that way. And then I can move on. If I know exactly what the name of the font is that I want to use, I could, instead of clicking the drop-down arrow and scrolling through the menu here, I could actually click in this box and type it in. So let's say I want Times New Roman. That used to be the default font in Microsoft Word back in the day. So when I type time, it's filled it in, Times New Roman, and I can press enter to select that as my font. And there, my text is changed to it. Great. Next to that, we have our font size. So our font size is exactly what it sounds like. It's just going to be how big are the characters in my text. So if I want super tiny text, I can come down here to 8 and it makes it real tiny. If I want much larger text, I can click on that and say, change it to 48 or something. There we go. And so it resizes all of the text that I have selected to that size. If I want a size that's not listed here, that's totally fine. So let's say, for example, I've got 28 and it skips up to 36. Let's say I want to go for 30 even. I'll just click up here and type in 30 instead and press enter on my keyboard. And there we have it. This is a new paragraph. It's short. It's in 30-point font. If I want, I can also use these A buttons with the up and down arrows to resize my text a little bit larger or a little bit smaller. So the larger A with the up arrow makes my text a little larger, goes to essentially the next size that's listed in this menu. The smaller A with the down arrow, as you might imagine, makes my text smaller. Next to that is the change case button. If I click on this, what it's going to do is all the text that I have selected down here, it's going to change the capitalization to follow the rule that we've got here. So sentence case is basically just going to capitalize the first character of each sentence. When I do that, nothing happens because that's already what I have. It might uncapitalize some proper nouns if you have them in your document. So watch out for that. If you've got somebody's name or the name of a place in there, just be careful. Lowercase, of course, will change everything to lowercase, even if it's at the beginning of a sentence. Uppercase goes all caps, so you can shout at somebody if you need to. Capitalize each word is, of course, exactly what it sounds like. And finally, toggle case makes everything that was lowercase capital and everything that was capital lowercase. And frankly, for this, at least, it makes it a nightmare to read. But you can use this if you weren't paying attention and you accidentally you accidentally did the capitalization wrong, or if you're copying and pasting some text where the person wasn't paying attention to the capitalization, all those sorts of things. You can use this to quickly fix it. Excuse me. And that can be really, really useful. Next to that is this A with an eraser. we'll come right back to that, but I want to push on from that for now. Underneath, we have our character styles of various sorts. So, for example, this B is bold. Click on that. I'll make my text bold. Yay. Click on it again. Unbold. I've got italics here. Click on the I. It italicizes my text. Click on it again. Puts it back to normal. Underlining is here. The underlining button's a little bit different. It's got the U with a little underline on it. And if I just click on the U or the underlining, if I click on the button rather than the drop down arrow, in other words, then it's going to underline the text. If instead I click on the drop down arrow, then I can choose from a bunch of different underlining styles, like so. And whichever one I choose, if I were to choose, say, this one, for example, the dot dash underline, that one's going to become the new default. So if I went to a different place and I click the underline button again, it's going to underline in that same style with the dot and dash. And click it again to turn it off. So whichever one you use becomes the default. That becomes the one that you'll get when you click the button. And that can be pretty handy, so that way you keep everything stylistically consistent. Strike through, subscript, and superscript. So strike through is just going to be crossing out text like this. So if you want some text in your document, but you want it crossed out, that's what strike through is for. And then subscript and superscript, excuse me. So subscript, you probably won't find yourself using that much. As far as I have, from what I've seen, it's basically only used in things like math for logarithms and stuff like that. And it's used in chemistry. But in day-to-day life, I don't often find myself using subscript. Your mileage may vary. The other option, superscript, though, is slightly more common. It is still used in math and science, of course, for things like exponents. But you might also find it in other places. For example, like so. When I type March 4TH, and then I press the space bar to go to the next word, what it's actually doing is changing these two letters, the T and the H, into superscript. In fact, if I select just the T and the H, you'll notice the superscript button is kind of lit up here. So it's saying, yeah, this text is superscript. Click this to turn it off if you want to. So I could do that. If I don't want it to do this, another thing that I can do is hit undo. And you'll notice when I move my mouse over undo, it says undo auto format, Control Z. So auto format is taking those T's, the T and the H that I just typed in, and auto format was the process that changed them into the superscript TH or and so if I don't want that, I can undo it and then move on. But this looks nice. Most of the time I leave it the way it is. And if you need to do superscript manually, just select the text that you want to be superscript and click this. The other thing that you can do, by the way, with this sort of thing is, let's say I want to do x squared. Let's start a new line here. Let's say I want to do x squared. I'm writing a math problem. I've got the x here, and I know that the next thing is going to be the 2 in superscript to make it an exponent. I'm going to come up here, click on the superscript beforehand, and then if I hit the 2, it'll become superscript. Now, auto format also changed my X to a capital, which I don't want. But now you can see we've got a superscript 2 here. And now, and if I keep typing, turn it off. There we go. Cool. So So that's superscript. And any of these formatting options that we've talked about so far, changing the font size, bold, italics, underlining, if you know already that you want to use them before you type the text that you're going to type, then you just turn it on, type what you want to type, and then when you're done, turn it off. Like that. Okay, so let's talk about these buttons here. So this kind of weird glowing A, I guess, is text effects and typography. If I select some text and I click on that, it's going to give me the drop-down menu here, and I can select from these sort of different pre-made text styles. So for example, this one is blue. It's a blue gradient, actually, so it goes from a darker blue to a lighter blue as it goes down. You'll notice it's dark blue on the top and lighter blue at the bottom. And then it has a reflection underneath it. So, so it kind of looks like it's seeing itself in a reflecting pool or something. This one has an outline in gold, and then it's filled in gold as well. In fact, a gold gradient. Whoops, undo. And so you can see it's doing a bunch of different things. You've got this beveling look. You've got kind of a shadow, all sorts of things. So just whatever you want your text to look like, you can choose one of these settings, or you can change each of those options individually. You can add an outline, a shadow, a reflection, a glow around the characters. You can change, and depending on your font, you might be able to change the style of the way numbers are printed. You might be able to enable what are called ligatures, for example, which are basically just characters that can be connected together in various ways when they're next to each other. And then stylistic sets, certain sets of characters can be turned into like an interesting sort of visual flourish, like this A, B, and C that they have next to it as an example. Let's see, I'll choose this one. Okay, we're going to skip over this for a moment. Come back to it here shortly. This A with a red swatch underneath it, that's our font color. So I changed the color using this text effects and typography, but I can change just the color and nothing else by either clicking this A with the red underneath it, and that'll turn my text red, or by clicking the drop-down arrow next to that button and choosing a color from this menu, or even coming down here and clicking more colors and mixing my own color in there. Let's say I want a green, select that, there we have it. Now it's green. And you'll notice again, when I selected the green from the menu and made this text green, the color swatch underneath the A turned green. So if I come back over here, select this text and click the A or the green swatch, it turns the text green rather than red like it is by default. So up here at the top, back up at the top, we had this A button with the eraser next to it, and I said we'd come back to that. Well, now it's the moment. This is the clear all formatting button. When I click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to change the text that I have selected back to the default options. Check it out. When I click it, it goes back to Calibri, the default body font that we have right now, 11-point size, bold is removed, italics are removed, underlining is removed, the color is removed, text effects and typography are removed. All of that stuff goes back to normal, and I get regular plain old text, basically. So if you've made a lot of changes to your document and you're like, or to the text in your document, and you're like, this is not what we want, you can use this to quickly revert back to the default thing. So one formatting option up here that does not follow that rule, though, is highlighting right here. I'm going to click on this highlight button. When I click on that, you'll notice it fills in, you know, it kind of, the button is shaded as though something's been turned on, and it has. When I move my mouse down here, you'll notice I get kind of, in addition to the regular mouse pointer that I have while I'm working in the text of my document, it has this little highlighting marker next to the cursor. If I hold down with my mouse and I drag over a piece of text and let go, it's going to highlight that text in yellow, which is the default highlighting color. But if I click the drop down arrow next to that, I could change to one of these other highlighting colors if I want to. So I could, you know, if I'm reading something that that I want to make sure I retain, I could maybe highlight the people's names in yellow and the place names in turquoise or whatever. And my cursor will stay in highlight mode until I get out. If I click this again, then it goes out of highlighting mode, and selecting text will just select the normal way as we did before. But my highlighting doesn't go away. In order to get it to go away, I have to either select the text and click on the highlight button again, which will clear it out, or I can go back into highlighting mode by clicking the button without any text selected, and I can select highlighted text and let go. Oh, that actually fills it in with the blue because I changed colors. But now if I do it, boop, okay, the highlighting's gone. Clear all formatting will not remove highlighting. So just know that, so that way you aren't surprised if that doesn't work. Cool. So let's talk about paragraph formatting really quick. And what we're going to do here, so let's see. Well, let's okay, cool. I am going to go ahead and clear all formatting on this just so it's easy to see what's going on. Okay, let's look at paragraph formatting. Now, in order to change the style of a particular paragraph, I don't have to have it all selected like I did with the text down there. All I have to do is have my cursor somewhere in or next to that paragraph, like so. When I make changes in this paragraph area of the Home tab, all of it on the ribbon here, all of this is going to, or this whole paragraph is going to change. So let's talk about this. I've got my left, align left button here, and that's already lit up or shaded in for me. By default, text in Word is aligned along the left-hand margin of the page. So in this case, we've got 1 inch margin on all sides. That's the way it's set up when you first come in. And so your text lines up 1 inch from the edge of the page. If, however, I want my text centered instead, I can come up here and click the center button. When I do that, it centers the text. If I press enter to try and type a new paragraph, that will also be centered. And my cursor will start right here in the middle of the document. And then as I type, it works its way outwards, like so. Once a whole line has been filled up, then it's going to go down and start in the middle of the next line. So that's centered text. You could also align your text along your paragraph along the right-hand margin if you wanted to. And you'll notice it's kind of flat over here and it's a little ragged over here because these lines aren't exactly the same length. But we have yet another option up here, the justify setting. If I click on that, what it's going to do is give me, it's going to actually line my text up along the left margin and the right margin, flush with both margins except for the last line of the paragraph. The reason that it does this, and so the way it works is, I mean, basically you just type a line of text like normal. When it gets to the end, and you can't possibly fit any more words on that line, what it's going to do is adjust the spacing between words just a little bit. So that way you get your text aligned along both margins. The last line of each paragraph, though, the spacing doesn't get adjusted because, number one, it would look a little weird if there was so much space between these few words that that the period here aligned with the right-hand margin. But also, it's a visual signal to your reader that this is the end of a paragraph. If you look at a newspaper or a magazine and most books, your text, the text in there is going to be justified. So, so now that I've said that, you'll definitely see it next time you open up a newspaper. It gives it a nice, clean, professional look, but it may not be the right thing for every situation. So just use it when it feels right to do so. Okay, next to that, we have paragraph spacing. If I click on this, I can change the settings up here at the top are my line spacing. So the spacing between lines of text inside a single paragraph. If I change it to single space 1.0, you'll notice that my lines inside this paragraph move just slightly closer together because the default setting is 1.15. So 15 hundredths of a line's worth of space between each line of text. Rather than single space, they're right next to each other. 1.5 gives you half a line's worth of space between each line of text. 2.0 is double space. 2.5 is double and a half. And 3.0 is triple space. So just depending on how much space you need between each line of text or what look you're going for, you can adjust this. The default, though, is this 1.15. That's what Word normally does, just to keep everything a little less together and therefore a little cleaner looking. There's also add space before paragraph. So if you want some extra space before each paragraph in your document, you can click on this, or before just this paragraph. There's also remove space after paragraph. So you'll notice there's that extra space that that falls between peppers, and it works its way outwards. If I go to remove space after paragraph, that extra spacing goes away. That's there by default, though. I usually leave these settings as they are. Particularly if you're in school or something, you might have to change some of these settings to get it to look right, or if you're just going for a particular look. But you have those options there. By the way, if you change the settings of the last paragraph in your document and then you continue writing, whatever settings you set for that last paragraph, when you start a new paragraph, those settings will also apply to that one. So if you want the paragraph settings to apply to only just the one paragraph, then you've got to change them back the next time, when you start the next paragraph or afterwards somehow, or it applies to the previous one. So another thing you can do in this paragraphs area is you can write lists and organize them. So let's say I write a list of Star Wars characters. Okay, I've got some Star Wars characters here in the order of appearance in case you're curious. And what I want to do is, what I've done is just typed the name of the character and pressed enter to go to the next line. And that's fine, but it doesn't look great because we've got that extra space between each thing. And it's kind of hard to tell which item is if I smush them all together, it would kind of be hard to tell whether it was all one paragraph or whether these were different items, or whether these are just paragraphs that I started but didn't finish. It looks unfinished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this into a bulleted list. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this text, all of these characters that I've listed out, come up to the top and click on this bullets button here. When I do that, you'll notice it pushes them slightly together, although not all the way together. It indents them, and it gives me a bullet, a little bullet icon next to each one. So that way I can tell, okay, this is the first item, this is the second item, this is the third item, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really handy. Another thing I can do if I want to add additional lines here, I can go to the end of a particular item, press enter on my keyboard, and then it will automatically indent and create another bullet point for me. So I don't have to worry about folding this into my list or selecting it and then going back up to the bullets button. I can just keep typing my list. Let's say that I'm done though. What I'm going to do is to get out of this list, to get out of this sort of listing mode, I'm going to press enter again as though I was going to write and put another item on my list. But then I'm going to press enter again, and that is going to take me back here to so that I can type some regular text. Ta-da! Beautiful. Let's say I want to write a numbered list. Instead of writing my items and then selecting them and clicking the numbering button up here at the top, instead I'm just going to click the button right away because I know I want a numbered list. I'll click the numbering button and it indents and gives me number 1 here. I'll press enter and it gives me number 2. There we go. Awesome. So each time I just pressed enter when I was done typing an item, it brought me down to the next line, indented for me, and gave me the next number for my numbering. So that way I don't have to worry about keeping the numbers consistent. Word will worry about that instead, and I can just focus on making sure I get all the items in my list. If I want, I can also change the character over here. Instead of bullets, I could use something else, or I could change the numbering. To do that, so let's look at the bullets for a sec. To do that, I'm going to come up here to the bullets button, hit the drop down arrow next to it, and I can come down here where it says bullet library, and I can choose a different icon. So I could choose the square bullet, or I could do check marks, or I could do this chevron, or I could do whatever this thing is. Doesn't matter. I can choose whichever one I want, and there I am. Beautiful. Same with the numbered list. If I click the arrow next to the numbering button, it's going to give me other options. I could use a number with a right parenthesis next to it rather than a period. I could do Roman numerals, lowercase Roman numerals. I can do lettering. And so on and so forth. And you can even define your own. If you come down here and click define new number format, you can make up your own one. That's probably not going to be necessary, but you could do it. I'll change over to Roman numerals. There we go. And now let's say I want to flesh this out a little bit and make it a little bit more of an outline rather than just a straight up numbered list. Let's say I want to say the kinds of things that I might have for breakfast. I'm going to press enter on my keyboard after the word breakfast, and you'll notice right away it gives me Roman numeral 2, and it changes the numbers next to all of these others. So lunch is now 3, dinner is now 4, and midnight snack is now 5. But I want this to be essentially a sub-item of breakfast. So what I'm going to do is press the tab key on the left-hand side of my keyboard, just above caps lock. By the way, please pretend the caps lock key doesn't exist. If you want to capitalize, hold down shift and press the key that, the letter that you want to capitalize. Caps lock is kind of a bad habit, and it's also inefficient. You can, rather than pressing a key, To get a capital letter, if you're using caps lock, you have to press the key 3 times. Whereas if you're holding shift, you can hold down shift, press the key you want to capitalize, and then just let go of shift, and you're good to go. Anyway, that's an aside. Breakfast, and now that I've hit tab, I have A down here. So I could say cereal, protein bar, eggs, pancakes, whatever. So I could even add sub items like, so if I say fruit, I'll press enter and I'll hit tab again, and now I can say apple, orange, banana. So that allows me to create a whole outline. You just press tab when you want to go down a level. If you want to go up a level, so let's say I want to add another item to this bigger list of breakfast foods, I'll hold shift while pressing tab. And that takes me back, and now I have item F, which will be bacon. There we go. So now I have a nice little outline for myself. All right, so let's look at inserting things into my document. Oh, I guess up here. One other thing to mention, or 2 other things to mention. One is you have these indentation buttons here, so you can indent a line or a paragraph if you want to use that. You have some other buttons here that are not terribly useful, so we're going to skip over them. And you also have this thing. It kind of looks like a backwards P, and that's the show and hide formatting marks button. The backwards P specifically is a paragraph mark. If I click on that, you'll notice it gives me some extra little characters in here. It makes my document slightly harder to read, so I usually don't work with this on. But it gives me an idea of what the invisible stuff is that's happening inside my document. For example, here at the end of this, after the word peppers and the period here, I hit enter and I made that the end of the paragraph. So there's a paragraph mark here, and there's a paragraph mark here and here and here. You can see where this is indented by these little arrows between the bullet icon and the thing that's listed there. And you can even see these little dots between words where the spaces are. So that'll help you see essentially what's invisible in your document. And sometimes that can be a real lifesaver if your document's doing something weird that you don't expect. So just wanted to point that out. If you click it again, that goes away. Okay, let's talk about inserting a picture. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Let me say, if you are working with a document that's going to have a really strong mix of pictures and text, Word is not the program for you for that particular purpose. Word is a great word processor. In other words, it's great for writing text, but it's only passable when it comes to dealing with images. And so if I'm using a document that has a lot of images, if I'm creating a document that has a lot of images, or that's mostly images, or where the images are a big part of the experience of the document, I'm not going to use Word for that. In Microsoft Office, I'm probably going to use Publisher, or you could use some other graphic design type tool. Canva is a free one that you can find online that just works in your web browser. If you want to get real fancy, you have Adobe InDesign, and there are a lot of possibilities, but Word is not the best choice for a document that has a lot of images associated with it. Okay, so let's talk about it for a sec. I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to put the picture. I'm actually going to put the picture right here between maybe I just felt a little funny, but that's okay. And I'll show you why in a sec. Okay, I'm going to come up here, click on the Insert tab to change my ribbon. I'm going to click on Pictures. And then I'm going to click on this device. So you might have a slightly different layout here. You might have multiple buttons that are like pictures and online pictures, and that works too. You just want, essentially, I want to be able to pick a picture from my computer here. Let's see, I'll head to the downloads folder here, and let's see, this image I'm using for a new class. I'll choose this one to insert this time. Click insert, and now it's in here. So the image shows up right here inside of my document, exactly where my cursor was when I started it. Maybe I just feel a little funny, period. Picture, but that's okay. In fact, if I make this smaller, you'll see it's actually on the same line as, but that's okay. And if I make it a lot smaller, then you can actually, maybe I just felt a little funny, period. Here's the picture, and then, but that's okay. So it's what we call in line with the text, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's lined up with the text on the same line as the text. But I can change this. If I click on the image, you'll notice this little button here. You may have it up top, wrap text, or text wrapping, or something like that is what it'll say. If I click on that, I can change it to, for instance, square text wrapping. If I click on that, you'll notice my text kind of flows around it. Maybe I just felt a little funny, but that's okay. The rain in Spain, blah, 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 like that. And if I move it up a little bit, then you'll see it, essentially it just flows through and kind of like stops there. Like skips over it and keeps going with the sentence. Let's see. So that's the square one. Tight is going to close in on it a little bit more. And if the image has transparent sections to it, it's going to kind of contour the text to those transparent sections. So if it was a star, then you'd have text, if the arm of the star is here and goes in, then the text is going to actually come in here as well. So that's kind of cool. You've got through, or actually, no, that's what the through is right there. That will actually work with transparent sections and things like that. Tight is just going to be a little closer. You'll notice that this text is moving a little bit when I switch between square and tight. This one here, through, if you have any transparent sections or anything like that, it will put text inside of them. This one's one that I like, top and bottom. So essentially, it will just keep lines of text together and put the picture on its own line. That makes a lot of sense to me. Seems very readable. I like that one a lot. Behind text is exactly what it sounds like. So the picture is there and the text just goes right over it. You want to make sure that your text is still readable. If you do that, excuse me, and then in front of text, we'll just let the text run right behind the image, which is a little weird. Fix, move with text, or fix position on page. Move with text if I add, because this picture is, let's bring it back to square, yeah. Because this picture is in line with my text, if I add something, say here, just depending on what the settings are and where the text is, in line might be a better way to demonstrate this. Here we go. Okay. So you'll see once I add some extra text, it kind of moves down to the bottom of the next line. And so on. So move with text will shift it around with as you add more text to your document. Fix position on page means you just choose where the image is going to go, and it doesn't move unless you move it. So it stays right there, regardless of what the text around it is doing. So that's inserting a picture. Let's talk about the last few things here. So I'm going to come down here And let me just duplicate this. So I'm going to copy and paste this so that it's so that I can work with it a little bit. All right, I've got my paragraph here. I'm actually going to make several copies of this. So I can click copy, come down here, right click and click paste. This little keep source formatting the brush here. Or I can just, now that it's copied, I can paste it again and again. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut to do that though. It's Control V. So if I hold Control in the bottom of my keyboard while pressing V, that's the keyboard shortcut for paste. The way I remember that is the V looks like an arrow pointing to the spot where I want to paste a copy of the thing that I just copied. So Control V, Control V, Control V. If you're using a Mac, you can also use this. The only difference is that keyboard shortcut is Command V. So it's Command, the button that looks like it has a stove on it, and hold that down while pressing V. Okay, cool. So I've got a bunch of copies of this paragraph here. Let's say that I want to end the page right here after this copy of it. We'll make this one red so that I can easily tell what it is. And I'll make this one green so I can tell what it is. So I want the red paragraph and the green paragraph to be on different pages. So in order to make that happen, what I'm going to do is click at the end of this paragraph. And I'll go ahead and press enter to make a blank line here, just because that makes this a little easier. I'm going to go up to the Insert tab, and I'm going to click on Page Break. When I do that, it separates these two and basically ends the page right here. In fact, if I go back and I turn on my formatting marks, you'll see page break right there. So that tells me the page ends here. Now I also have an extra line of space here that I don't want. I'll press delete on the keyboard and get rid of that. So now I have this page break in the middle. The cool thing about this, so a lot of times folks will, if they're trying to put something on another page, they'll just go enter until it gets to the top of the next page, like so. But if you add something additional in here, let's say I paste another copy of the paragraph, then it pushes this down on the next page, and that's not what you want. Or if I remove something from here, let's say I delete two copies of the paragraph, then it moves it back up to the bottom of this page. So that's not a very good way to do this. Instead, I'll get rid of this, drop that page break in there, delete this extra line. And now anything I add here, if I add a few new copies of the paragraph, whoops, this doesn't move. If I fill up this entire page and push the page break to the next page, then it will create, essentially it'll create a blank page beyond that. So like so. So now we have a blank page for now. And if I keep on pasting, then eventually I'll get more paragraphs on that page. So page break, really useful. You also have what are called section breaks, which will help you separate whole sections of a document rather than just pages, and just a lot of other things. Okay, let's talk the last few things. We ran a little bit behind today. I'm so sorry, but we'll cover these last few things. If anybody needs to go, I totally understand, but hopefully y'all be able to tackle these last couple of bits with me. Okay, so let's talk about margins, orientation, and size. If I go to the design, or excuse me, layout tab up here at the top, I can change the margins of my page. So by default, the margins are 1 inch on all sides, but you could also switch to narrow margins, so you only have 1/2 inch on each side. or you could go to moderate, 1 inch on top and bottom, 2 or 3/4 of an inch on the left and right, and so on and so forth. There are a bunch of different options here. You could go real crazy with it. You can even click custom margins and define your own exact margins exactly the way you want them to be. Orientation, that's just how the page is turned. So right now it's portrait. In other words, it's taller than it is wide. But if I change it to landscape, now it's essentially just turned on its side for me. So it just depends on how you're going to be printing or how you want the layout to be. You can also change the size of page. By default, at least here in the US, it's a letter size page, 8.5 by 11 inches. But you could change it to a legal size page, so 14 inches long rather than just 11. A little bit longer. You can kind of see if I zoom out here. By the way, there's zoom at the bottom here, so I can zoom out and zoom back in if I want. So you can see now it's a little taller if I change back to letter size. Yeah. And you can choose, there's A3 and A4, which are more of the non-American standards, and 11 by 17, a whole bunch of other sizes, envelope sizes, postcard sizes, whatever. I mean, you click more paper sizes, you can see it's basically an overwhelming amount of different possible sizes that you could choose. You can also do columns here. So if I come up to the top, if I click on this columns button and I just select 2, it's going to change my whole document to have 2 columns the whole way through. However, or there's 3, there's left, which will give me a small left column and a large right column. And there's also right, which will give me a large left column and a small right column. If I go to, I'll change it back to 1 for the moment. If I go up here to more columns, then I can come down here where it says apply to and click this point forward and then change it to 2 columns. And now you'll notice it shows like there's grayed out stuff here and then there's 2 actual columns. If I click OK, on this page, it's all 1 column. Starting on this page, everything's 2 columns. And you can actually also, if I undo that, you can also select some text. Let's say just the text on this page. Click on more columns and do apply to selected text. When I click OK, now just this part is in 2 columns. And then I have my page break here stopping it, and the section break over here, which says this is the beginning of the columns, basically. All right, and then finally, one last thing to show you as far as this goes. Let's say that I want to end this column right here. I don't want any more of the text to be in this column. I want it to go ahead and move over to this one. If so, I can click right here, come up to where is this one? Oh, right, layout, and click on breaks. And this gives me, you can also drop in a page break from here, but there's also a column break. If I click on this, then here's the column break right here. And that's going to, and then the next column starts over here. And that's pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today? All right. I don't see anything, while I'm wrapping up. You can feel free to keep typing if you're typing a question. If you do have questions after the fact that you think of, in an hour or so, or on Monday next week or something, you can shoot me an email. The email address is digital@cals.org, digital@cals.org. Of course, Word Part 2, Styles, Mailings, and More is going to be next week, 1 o'clock to 2:30, same time, same place. Maybe I'll be in a different place. You'll probably be in the same place. Who knows? But I'll be here regardless of where I am physically. Um, so I definitely would love to have you join me for that. Um, so come on down. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of the day. Have a great one.